you remember them? When I was a child, I was frightened by my bad dreams. But now I know all about dreams. See, dreams are like a reflection of your face in a mirror, you know? It's not really there, even though you might think it is. Our friend Theodore didn't always agree. I remember one time when Theodore had a dream so real, he thought he'd seen a sea monster. And it was on a night just like tonight, I'd say. Yeah, with a new canoe moon in the sky and the waves going gloppity-glop. The old town clock on Citadel Hill told midnight. Somewhere, a lone Canada goose cried its haunting cry, flying south ahead of the icy winds of winter. The tugs were sound asleep at the great Ocean Tug and Salvage Company dock. The water was getting chillier, and they'd snuggled together for warmth. Something was gurgling. It was gurgling under the inky sea. Gurgling at first, and then it was bubbling, and from the bubbling began a foaming, which at last became a swirling of something moving towards Theodore. Closer and faster, and from the water came a sea monster. A sea monster roared up from the dempy deep. Oh, it had bugly eyes and big batty wings to carry a tug down to its sea monster lair, far beneath the waves. Theodore gasped out loud, and it woke up Emily. Sea monster! Shivered Theodore. It had bugly eyes and batty wings and oh. Emily looked around, but there was no sea monster to be seen. It was only a dream, Theodore, she said. A dream? Repeated Theodore. Dreams aren't real, answered Emily, like when we pretend about pirates. Well, said Theodore, we never see pirates, but I did see this sea monster, right there. I don't think sea monsters are real, said Emily. You could get Fodak to ask his friends at the Oceanic Institute if there are any sea monsters, she said, trying to be helpful. Theodore decided he would ask Fodak in the morning. But that night, he couldn't get to sleep. He was sure the sea monster was out there, and he was sure it would come again. Just then, Theodore heard an odd sound. He saw that George was giggling, but he was fast asleep. Now, wasn't that strange? Theodore thought. The next morning, Theodore and Fodak went to the Oceanic Institute to find out about sea monsters. Rebecca, the research vessel, knew everything about the seven seas. And they found Rebecca floating in her dock. Rebecca, said Fodak, are there any sea monsters? Well, replied Rebecca, after she had thought about it, sometimes we think we see monsters, but they turn out to be funny kinds of fish. Our research shows that our harbor is sea monster free. Well, said Fodak, that's that. Nothing to worry about. Nothing at all, added Theodore, and they floated for home. Fodak was thinking, do you think the bugly eyes could just have been old bumpers floating on the water? Well, what about the batty wings? Said Theodore. Later that same day, a hammering and a clattering and even a crashing sound could be heard coming from the great Ocean Tug and Salvage Company dock. Fodak came by, towing a big snaky piece of driftwood beside him. How's this? He called to Theodore, who was floating beside an old fishing net with pieces of seashells and empty tin cans and other bits and things hanging from it. Theodore studied Fodak's driftwood carefully. Just what we need for our monster trap, he declared at last. Also, I found an old fishing net. Now that will catch it for sure. Later, Hank appeared. He stared at Theodore's sea monster trap, because it certainly looked very impressive. What will you do when you catch the sea monster? He asked. Will you keep it, Theodore? Now, that was something Theodore hadn't thought of. Having a sea monster around all the time would be terrible. Sea monsters are quite clever, said Fodak. So it won't actually come into the trap, but it will scare it away, added Theodore hopefully. That evening, the sun sailed over the edge of the ocean, and soon the harbor was dark. Theodore settled into his place at the dock beside his sea monster trap. At midnight, the hour of deepest darkness, there came a gurgling sound from the very deepest, darkest depths of the harbor. First a gurgling, and then a bubbling, and finally a foaming was seen. And from that foaming came a swirling, and from a swirling, something rising. It was rising, and it was rising, and it was rising from the water. From the water came the monster, and from its mouth an anchor dangling, for on a tug it had been dining. Then a voice began calling for him, calling, Theodore, 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 wake up! It was Emily. She was calling his name and nudging him awake. Well, Theodore looked fearfully around for the sea monster, but it had disappeared again. The next morning, Theodore and Emily were hard at work, taking the Gloria Cornwallis filled with winter wheat to the grain elevators. I must get the wheat to the grain elevators, Theodore said to himself slowly. He was very, very tired. He hadn't been able to sleep on account of the sea monster. He wished he could have a little nap right then and there. Theodore's eyes began to get heavy, as if he was going to go to sleep. Theodore, mind your course. It was Petra, the pilot boat. Theodore saw that his end of the ship was heading right towards my office. Quickly, he set himself right and apologized to Gloria. Oh, sorry, Gloria. Ships don't like bumping of any kind at all. It can hurt their hulls. But soon, Theodore's eyelids felt like they had little anchors on their ends, pulling them down. And he began drifting off again. Theodore drifted right into the ship and gave her a big bump. Oh, sorry, Gloria. He apologized again. After they had finished moving the ship, Petra called Theodore aside. Theodore, she said, are you feeling well? Yes, replied Theodore. He didn't want to worry everybody about sea monsters. Maybe you had better return to your dock, said Petra. Well, Theodore didn't know what to say. He had been tugging so well lately and was almost thinking he might go out on the ocean one day and see the world. But now, he wouldn't even be allowed to leave his dock. Emily stared sadly at her friend. She knew what was really the matter, but what could she do? Theodore floated silently in his dock. Soon it would be night. And he knew that soon after that, the sea monster would come. Emily knew that old sea monster was just a bad dream, but Theodore didn't. I have a great idea, she announced. I'll stay awake tonight and watch with you to see if it comes. With Emily safely watching up beside him, Theodore was soon sound asleep. But as the old town clock tolled midnight, Emily grew sleepy, and by the last toll of midnight, she was snoring. After the snoring came a gurgling sound, and then a foaming. The foaming on the sea was growing, until finally there was a swirling, and then the monster came a-calling. Its eyes were wide as whale pies, and it had a long green glowy tail, which was really the scariest sight of all. Theodore blasted his horn. The blast woke up Emily. Sea monster! He cried. Didn't you see it? He asked Emily. But Emily had to admit that she'd fallen asleep. I may as well move to another harbor, said Theodore, because I'll never sleep here again. And that means I'll never work or go out on the ocean. Emily stared at her unhappy friend. Then she heard a strange sound and saw that it was George, who was fast asleep and once again was giggling. How strange indeed. The next morning, the tugs were all setting off for work. All the tugs but one. Theodore was feeling very sleepy and sad and left out. Don't worry about me, he said to the others. I'll just stay here in my dock forever. Emily, who had been thinking some more about something, turned to George and said, George, why were you giggling in your sleep last night? I was, said George, quite surprised. Oh, he said. Oh, that was the waltzing Sugar Plum Harbor fairies. Oh, every night they come and dance around the dock. They're funny. Suddenly, Emily had a great idea, even greater than her last one. She turned to Theodore and said, Theodore, you and I will stay awake tonight together and see what happens. And this time, I promise, I won't go to sleep. Well, that night, Theodore decided he would try Emily's idea, although he wasn't completely sure what it was. He stayed awake with Emily to see what would happen. The old town clock was ticking and talking, and soon enough, it would be a tolling midnight. And sure enough, George was giggling. It looks like George's fairies have come, Emily whispered. Theodore looked and looked, but he couldn't see any waltzing Sugar Plum Harbor fairies. Not a one. He was certain they would come, because George said he saw them, and George always told the truth. So he kept on looking. But after a really good look, he said, I don't see any fairies. But George does, said Emily quietly. Then Theodore knew. He knew that George's ferries would not come that night, and he knew something else. Something that made him feel much, much better. He knew his sea monster wouldn't come either. It was just a dream, too, just like Emily had said. Sweet dreams, Theodore, said Emily with a smile in her voice. Theodore was already fast asleep. He was so tired of not having slept in days and days. Soon he was snoring. And after the snoring, there came a giggling. Dreams can be wonderful. You know, a good story always makes me hungry. I don't think one more biscuit would give me bad dreams, do you? Besides, like Theodore says, a dream is just a dream. Delicious. I've got to get to bed. Thanks for visiting us here in the Big Harbor. And we'll see you again next time. Good night.
He's a tugboat and a friendly tugboat too. A friendly tugboat too. Oh, Theodore likes to do the things that friendly tugboats do. Pushing and a pulling in the great big harbor, in the great big world is so much fun. So many brand new things to discover. Waking with the sun, gotta get the job done. Oh, Theodore.